Today we're talking about recent coverage of the coronavirus from the team of journalists at Marijuana Business Daily. If you want more detail, please visit mjbizdaily.com. So part one will be focused on the supply chain. What we've been writing about lately every day on mjbizdaily.com is how the coronavirus is impacting the marijuana industry, and it's affecting every sector, from packaging to vape companies to retailers. We've seen significant impacts all the way down the line. Kind of the first thing that we started reporting on was the impact of coronavirus on the cannabis supply chain. Initially, when we first started doing the reporting, we were looking into kind of how these companies that source hardware, especially vape companies that source hardware from China, were going to be impacted. And it was clear right away that when the outbreak began in Wuhan and spread to the factory locations of Shenzhen in particular, that these vape companies were going to have trouble sourcing their hardware. Something like 90 to 95% of all hardware for vape pens, for batteries, anything that goes into making a vaporizer is manufactured in Shenzhen or the areas around it. So, one of the kind of first questions was, so what are these companies going to do? And at first, it didn't seem like it was going to be such a big deal because a lot of people kind of buy in bulk and they have these big orders of, large shipments. But, as this kind of dragged on, then it started to look like, okay, maybe there was going to be a potential issue with getting enough hardware. The most recent story that I wrote, I spoke with a few vaporizer companies with manufacturing in Shenzhen. They said that the factories were kind of back up and running, not at 100% capacity, but people were coming back to work. There were, a few reasons why they weren't able to get all the way up to 100% capacity. One just being that people were quarantined still in China, and also that they were not really ready to go back to work and work in a factory at close quarters and risk the coronavirus. So that was kind of the supply chain piece. We also wrote about how this does just kind of explore the idea that there is a lot of fragility in the supply chain for cannabis companies because they're sourcing everything from one country. And there just really isn't a lot of domestic US options for this kind of hardware. In a similar vein, aside from the vape companies, we've also seen packaging companies or marijuana companies that are working with packaging companies in China. We've seen them also struggle to find alternatives, but people have been able to find a few more options than the vaporizer companies. Packaging can be made in India, Mexico. There's other places where these US companies can source that packaging. So we've seen people kind of come up with some other creative solutions, which is kind of the theme of the reaction to the coronavirus, that people have had to kind of figure out innovative ways to keep their businesses running and to keep their supply chains flowing and everything. So from our international team, we've also seen some reporting on how Europe's largest market in Germany hasn't really seen much impact on the supply chain for medical cannabis. It seems like a lot of those European countries are still able to source the cannabis that they need. So that's good. Beyond the supply chain, we've seen some kind of major impacts on the retail sector. Like that, the retail sector has probably been the most affected by this. States in the US kind of roll out new responses, and we've seen recommendations from the CDC that gatherings of more than 10 people are not recommended. Then these retailers have tried to come up with ways to try to keep their customers safe, but still continue to sell product. And curbside sales have really picked up lately. We've seen a lot of encouraging of online ordering, discounts for online ordering. That way, these consumers can kind of just pick up their product and go. But a lot of these retailers are really concerned that if there is like a total shutdown in whatever city they're in, that they won't be able to make any sales at all, which will ultimately impact the entire supply chain again.